we're going to make a full day of this. So let's bring it in for a really important day, you guys and girls. All right. My name is Todd Offenbacher. Thank you all for being here today. I know there's a lot of people that came from really far away to be here, so thank you as well for making the long journey. As you can see by the size of the crowd that's here today, that Robb either owed a lot of you money or had a tremendous long-lasting impact on a lot of our lives. And clearly right now there's a deep love and support and gratitude that fills this valley today for Robb and his entire family. We want to start out by thanking Mitch for offering up the stables today, offering it up to have this celebration of life today. So thank you, Mitch, for offering that up. I also want to thank Woody from Crux for all the hard work, time, and energy, the equipment. And we got this beautiful valley to celebrate Robb's life in today. Also want to thank everybody else behind the scenes. There's too many people to thank, just so many people that helped the Gaffney family throughout the last 4 years, helped set up this event, helped set up the stage, and all the other people that just helped. There's just too many to thank, and it's no surprise that so many people came together. So thank you for that. Like so many people here today, I was Robb's best friend. Robb made us all feel like his best friend, but you probably weren't. I wasn't. Robb's family was his best friend. This entire community was Robb's best friend. He taught us all so many lessons, mostly by example, on endless ski tours and rock climbs and bike rides. He taught me so many lessons about agency, gratitude, humor, decision-making. He also taught me important lessons about cancer and about dying. How to talk about it, prepare for it, how to fight it, and every other obstacle along the way. He did it with bravery, dignity, and of course with his unwavering sense of humor. Robb was the most complete person I've ever known. Tell a quick story about Robb that to me really encompasses so much of him. There's so many stories here today, and we'll have time afterwards for everybody to share stories. But Robb Gaffney, Dr. Gaffney, diagnosed me in 2015 as bipolar. And we laughed our asses off. We thought it was so funny that on his letterhead he gave me a diagnosis as being a bipolar skier. You see, every year I work as a guide in the Arctic and the Antarctic, both polar regions. I think that really encompassed how good Robb's sense of humor was as a medical doctor of psychiatry, that he was able to laugh at that politically inappropriate joke. And still, probably later that day, later that week, treat patients with that serious disorder with heartfelt compassion and empathy. I think that really captured a part of Robb and his personal life that seemed so many of us didn't get to see as a professional. Also, I got one thing, and we'll keep going. I got to find it. There's one housekeeping note here real quick. For the owner of a Subaru with a Tahoe True sticker on it. You left your lights on. Even had the separate little notepad there. So today's gathering is a celebration of Robb's life. We have several speakers here today that will share their stories about Robb. We'll have plenty of time afterwards for us all to share stories with each other. I hope today we can laugh more than we cry. I know that that's what Robb wanted because he told me this. Directly after the speakers, we'll watch a memorial video right here on the screen in front. So keep your seats. And as soon as the video finishes, the beer taps will open back up. There's food trucks behind me. There's bathrooms back behind the small shed right here. We'll also have music by the Beer Gardeners and Gregory Brown. So let's make this an entire day of celebrating Robb Gaffney's life. Yeah. It's okay. Cheer. Yell. Let it out, you guys. I'm going to make it a good, positive day. Also want to mention, there's I got lost in my notes. Eggs, bacon, milk. That's the wrong ones. Sorry. There's also 3 tables over here, causes that were very dear to Robb's heart. Be the Match. If you guys don't know about it, there's a table over there you can learn about it. There's also QR codes on these tables to donate. These were really important to Robb. Tahoe Truckee True. It's another one. Yeah, let it out. Woo! Make this like a revival. Get going. Come on. And also, I'm not sure what the cause is, but giving blood. That was a huge one for Robb, to give blood. I think he got a lot of us to go down and give blood because it's just so important. There's also a memorial wall. Where's the wall? The memorial wall, yeah. You guys know where it is. Point to it because I've not seen it yet. That we encourage you all to leave photos or leave a message, and all that is going to be for the Gaffney family. There's also some QR codes to support the family that are around on some of these sheds over here. And I put that in there myself. I think that would be really good. So we'll get started with our first speaker. Andrea Gaffney, Robb's wife of 26 years, is going to be first.
Sorry. Okay. I don't know how close I need to be to this. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, I really want to talk and not cry. Okay. Okay. Robb with 2 B's. I always loved the 2 B's. He was my everything, and we were one, even though we were opposite in so many ways. There was beauty in that. Robb was so many things to so many people, and many of you have shared beautiful memories. So how do I even begin to try and tell our story and who Robb was to me? It's almost too big, but I will try. It's almost too big to tell, but I will try. Robb and I met in Tahoe, not on the slopes or out at the bar, but at Safeway Checker School in Truckee. Hired for the Christmas season. It is a good story. Immediately I knew our connection was beyond the ordinary. Robb was pretty low-key about skiing when we were dating. I knew he was in Tahoe to ski and have fun, but so was everyone else. About a month into dating, he wanted to show me a video that his brother Scott had made. I think Robb said that he was in the movie. I had never seen a ski movie before, so I was like, sure, let's watch it. So we were watching it together in my cozy little studio in Tahoe Vista, and I was blown away. Robb is sitting with me quietly, and here and there I'm asking him, is that you? Is that you? And he would say yes, very casually. Right then I was like, oh, this guy likes to ski. And he is really good. A beautiful skier. Talk about humble. So it began, and even though his first priority is to ski and make movies with his brother, he makes time for me. Robb introduced me to so much, but I didn't necessarily pick it up with the same passion. It didn't matter. We enjoyed whatever it might be when we were together, because the together is what mattered. We were on the same page with so much more. And I think we were intrigued with each other, and we wanted to explore that every day. And that is where I found that our conversations together were the ultimate. I lived for our long talks. I loved Robb's perspective on life. Robb's med school brought us to Colorado. These were special years while we navigated the next phase of our lives. Fast forward to getting married, then starting a family during Robb's residency years in Sacramento. Watching Robb become a father was the biggest gift of all. It made me smile every day. I felt so lucky. The love that poured out of him for Noah and Kate was extraordinary, and the connections were so real. Perhaps the greatest thing we learned from Robb was how to listen. This shaped not only how I grew as a mother, but the life skills our kids would learn as well. I am so thankful to have parented with Robb. I couldn't imagine a better partner to raise children with. As a family, we didn't travel first class, but we had first class experiences with Robb. Doing anything with Robb was like having VIP access and a personal guide to whatever adventure he had planned. He was masterful at planning our family activities. For him, it was all about the quality of the experience, no matter what it was, whether it was a hike or ice skating on a glassy alpine lake. My mouth is so dry. Robb was deeply dedicated to this community. This place meant so much to him. His effort to protect Tahoe was as much about the people living here as it was about the mountain. He valued everyone in this community. People and the connections between them were what mattered to him. He wanted this community to have a voice, to be heard, and in turn listen to one another. In that way, I feel Robb was a true humanitarian. 4 years and 4 months. It was an ultra marathon for our entire family. Getting Robb's diagnosis was the worst news imaginable, but I always felt we would get through it. I had to learn to be very patient. There was so much waiting for results, appointments, treatments, and waiting for things to be normal again. At some point during the 4 years, Robb's UC Davis doctor said this will be lifelong. I let go of the idea that our lives would ever be completely normal. I accepted that cancer would become an uninvited family member. Whatever it took for Robb to stay here with us was what we were going to do. This year, things changed. Time was feeling short. We started to make big decisions and prepare for the end of this road, but at the same time, there was still disbelief that the end would actually happen. It was hard to grasp that losing him forever was not just a possibility, but a reality. The difference between possibility and reality can be immense. One allows for hope, the other requires acceptance. We started making plans with friends and family to see each other and spend time together. Those visits were filled with heavy conversations, but Robb still inserted humor and made us laugh. What I noticed in these conversations is that even though Robb was the one suffering and leaving, he was still guiding his friends through the grief and loss and offering comfort. Robb wanted them to know it was okay. He fought for every last second with his family. It was worth it to him despite the pain. In Robb's final moments, I am so thankful he was surrounded by his family and nothing but love and gratitude. It was everything. So how do I even close this tribute? Robb, I know that I love you and always will. I feel lucky to have shared my life with you and to have raised 2 amazing children. And I am thankful for everything I learned about life and love in our 29 years together. And to quote Robb's friend Hannah Brew, and I felt it when I read it, we love you something big.
All right, our next speaker coming up is Jim Gaffney. And the oldest Gaffney brother, Steve, is, I think, going to read for Jim.
Hi, everybody. My dad's voice is he's got a little bit of a sore throat, and is not able to project today. So I'm going to read most of his talk and turn it over to him just at the end. So these are his words, his voice. To lose a child is devastating. He was our child, but he was his own man. The morning after he died, my wife and I took a walk in the woods behind his home. We were silent. My wife said, "Think of the good times." I tried. I thought of him as a youngster sailing. He loved to sail, a smile on his face as he pushed the boat to its limits. I recalled our 22-mile hike up Mount Marcy, the tallest peak in New York State. He was 10 years old. Our family raft trip on the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. It was 1983, the year of the Great Flood. We were on the river at peak flow. CFS was 100,000. It was a memorable trip. He was 12, and he knew he would return someday. He did return 7 times, both rafting and kayaking. He felt kayaking the Grand Canyon was one of life's greatest experiences. He began skiing at Big Tupper, where he honed his skills and developed his smooth, effortless form. Our small family cabin in the Adirondacks sits at the base of a small mountain. The trail is rocky and, in parts, very steep. It's a ritual for the family to hike it at least once a summer. That winter, Robb had sustained a severe knee injury skiing in Alaska, but he would not be deterred. Robb would be Robb. He did the 2-mile round trip on crutches. Remembering these memories and others provided only a short respite from our grief. Following high school, Robb attended the University of Colorado at Boulder. Why Colorado? Well, skiing, of course, but he put his nose to the grindstone and graduated a Phi Beta Kappa scholar. He was accepted at the University of Colorado Medical School, but opted out to ski for 2 years. He reapplied and was accepted again. The interviewer asked him, "Are you really going to come this time?" A few years later, with med school graduation coming, he had to decide his residency. He called us to tell us he was going to do a residency in psychiatry. There was a long silent pause on our end of the phone as my wife and I tried to gather our thoughts. We knew from experience that when Robb calls about something of importance, the decision has been made and he is only being polite to his parents. As I noted earlier, he was his own man. Psychiatry should not have been a surprise to us. He had long had an interest in the mind and human behavior, and his very nature was in alignment with his choice. It was a good one. Upon the announcement of Robb's passing, many hundreds of comments poured into his Caring Bridge site and Facebook, from close friends, acquaintances, people who had never known him but were drawn in by his story and his writing. A few would mention his skiing, but the overwhelming theme was his kindness and how he had helped people. I don't think his rearing had much to do with his nature. It was innate. He was born that way. His nature went deeper than kindness. He had empathy for those in need. He had the ability to step into their shoes and feel their pain. He could carry it one step further, however. Using his keen intuition, his open mind, and his psychiatric training, he could actually make a difference. Many years ago, when Robb was a student at the University of Colorado and Scott was working ski patrol, they got together to kayak the upper Colorado River. The river was high from winter melt. It was cold, fast, and the rapids were big. They had pulled into shore to take a break when word came downriver that a raft had flipped and one of the crew was missing. Robb and Scott spotted him, hopped into their kayaks, and struggled under difficult conditions to get him ashore, where they attempted CPR to no avail. The man was a complete stranger to them, but Robb took it upon himself to find out his identity and traveled to Denver to meet his wife. He felt that by talking about the events of the accident, he could provide her some closure. She responded in a letter to Robb and Scott, expressing her deep gratitude. The event was indicative of an inner nature which guided him throughout a shortened life. He went on to complete his residency in psychiatry at Davis. He excelled at it and was offered a position at the hospital there, but he declined. He couldn't wait to get back to Tahoe, the mountains, and the people here. There was never a dull moment with Robb. He was always on the move, usually outdoors when he found renewal. Along with Kate and or Noah, or a close friend, bonding was strong within the family because they communicated so openly. He felt assured that he and Andrea had prepared their kids for their future. The past 6 months had been painful for him as the cancer ramped up. The book he was writing to help cancer patients deal with the psychological aspects of cancer could only be worked on when the pain eased. He wrote to the very end, but was unable to finish the final and important chapter. He has dedicated this to daughter Kate. In late May, radiation to his back gave him some relief. He picked up Kate at Berkeley and they drove up to Yosemite. The next day, they made the long hike up to Half Dome. Kate, exhausted from a week of final exams, sat out the final pitch. But Robb scrambled up through the ice and snow to the top, where he sat alone overlooking the valley. He thought deeply about his family and the beauty around him, and that he would be leaving both. He thought about this earth, a special place that deserves special care. This would be his last outing.
I'm 90 years old, and I have had 53 precious years with Robb in my life. I would give anything to have had more, but more important, I wish Robb could have had 40 years more. What might he have been able to achieve? I would like to close with a poem I wrote to him. Robb, I will see your face reflected in the still waters. I will see you carving turns through unbroken powder. I will hear your voice in the raven's call, in the wind blowing through the tall pines, in the murmur of a slow-flowing brook, in the quiet swish of skates on a moonlit alpine lake, in the silence of gently falling snow. You will be everywhere. Your indomitable spirit will guide your family for the rest of their lives.
A lot of strength here today. Our next speaker is Renée Kojane. She's a long-time Tahoe friend of Robb's.
I'll take off my glasses. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay. I became friends with Robb just only about 10 years ago. But one could argue I got the best years of Robb. We met and bonded out of our genuine concern for our community. We seem to have a mutual curiosity about human nature, about what makes us tick as individuals, as communities, and really as human species. So I guess you could say the basis of our friendship was the exchanging of ideas. And that felt very unique. Robb asked that I speak here today. And he's a very intentional person. So I had to reflect about what it is he wanted me to say to all of you. And I think it's this. Robb wants us all to really get to the essence of what it means to be human and to be alive. He wants us to put aside our egos and get to our core and be honest and be real. And he wants us to be vulnerable and find meaningful connection to each other and to nature. He was so wise, and he generously shared his thoughts and seemingly boundless energy with all of us. And the hard part about losing Robb is that Robb is who we'd all want to go to in order to process the heartache we're experiencing right now. We want to talk to Robb about missing Robb. I'm just really going to miss him physically, walking and talking with him. But he gave me, and he gave all of you, the gift of an inside view to his last tender years here. He left us a map of how to navigate this rocky life in a more open-hearted way. Call it Robb's trail map. one that makes the path more meaningful so that we as individuals and as a community arrive to a more fulfilling and complete destination. Thank you, Robb, for giving so much of yourself and for a once-in-a-lifetime friendship.
Our next speaker is Tom Mooers, who was a friend of Robb's and the head of Sierra Watch.
Here we are. Here we are. It goes without saying that if it weren't for Robb, we probably wouldn't have gathered here today. But I think it's even more important to point out that if it weren't for Robb, here would not be here today. This mecca of mountain culture that shaped Robb in so many ways and that he in turn stood up to defend. Because of Robb and his ability to stake out the higher ground, here we are. And we can still see the mountains climbing to the Sierra sky. We can still hear that wind in the tall pines. We can feel something true. I met Robb about 10 years ago. I would call it meet cute at the Crest Cafe. Jamie Scheckman made the introduction. I know you're here, Jamie. Thank you. It was early days in what we then called the movement to keep Squaw true. And we met to talk about the development that proposes to transform this place. Because it was Robb, we talked about how that made me feel. And we talked about how it was dividing the community. And we talked about what to do about it. And full confession, he may have been your best friend, but he was my man crush. I came home from that meeting and explained to my wife something like, "Oh my God, I just met this guy." And can you blame me? That sparkle, that spirit, that deep, beautiful spirit. Robb joined the board of directors of Sierra Watch, and I got to know him as a comrade, as a friend, and as a fellow dad, striving to make the most of our lives in this beautiful, beautiful world. Of many, one quality I came to admire of Robb is Robb's ability to stake out the higher ground. And any time spent with Robb anywhere, maybe especially in the mountains, you could see it. I might be figuring out, where does my next step go? Or you might be plotting your line. But if you looked at Robb is staking out the higher ground. His gaze raised in amazement of our mountains. And not just for himself. I admired his ability to stake out the higher ground. I adored his capacity to share it, to lead us there with him. And in doing so, help us find our best selves, find our own true, I want to say that important word again, find our own true selves. You can even see it in the movie that Scott and Robb made about the epic struggle to defend this place, the movie To Keep Tahoe True. Most of us in that movie, and when I say most of us, I think most of the people here probably made an appearance in that movie. Most of us are spouting out our anger and indignation like, they want to build an indoor water park in Tahoe, no way. Or we're expressing our talking points and tactics. The California Environmental Quality Act says it. But watch Robb in that movie. Staking out the higher ground. Robb says, "I'm not sure if people recognize how close we are to a turn in the tide, not just here, but across the nation. Robb says, so that developers will have to honor mountain culture and the wisdom that lies within it. Honor mountain culture and the wisdom that lies within it. That's the higher ground. That's what Robb staked out for us. And now, here we are. In this place where we still see the mountains climb to the Sierra sky, we still hear the wind in the trees, we still feel something true. And if it weren't for Robb, we would see an indoor water park right over here. We would hear the clatter and shrieks of a roller coaster. And we would feel something false, something dark, loss upon loss upon loss. This too is Robb's work. Instead of getting laid low by the forces of greed and division, he has led us to this higher ground. So, here we are. The challenge is clear. The challenge is that when Robb inspires us, continues to inspire us, even after his final ascent, as Robb inspires us to seek out the higher ground, we let him. And in this way, we let Robb keep us true.
Our next speaker is Richard Montgomery, who's a psychiatrist and longtime friend since their residency at UC Davis back at the old turn of the century.
I'm used to public speaking, but I've been dreading this because I have visions of me not keeping it together. So this presentation is commercially brought to you by the fine makers of Xanax. Let me in. Sorry. I had to keep this cold or it would stop working in the heat. The first time that I met Robb, I was just off the moving van from South Carolina, and he from Boulder, Colorado. It was 1999. As newly minted doctors, we were barely done with graduation from our medical schools when we were expected to show up on the 1st of July at our internship and psychiatry residency at UC Davis Medical Center in Sacramento. Robb, initially, we were in the room. We met each other. He seemed like a really nice guy. And within 5 minutes of shaking hands, we discovered that we both each liked to ski. He seemed like, as I said, a really nice guy, and I thought we would probably do some skiing together during the 4 years of residency training we had ahead of us in Sacramento. I figured I could keep up with him. I remember saying confidently how I was looking forward to hitting the ski slopes at Tahoe and had every reason to think that Robb was just another recreational skier like me. After all, he said he learned how to ski back east as a kid in New York. And since I learned how to ski as a teenager in North Carolina, I assumed, we might be at or near the same skills level. Now, this is just how humble of a guy Robb was. Before the end of that first week, our fellow resident and friend, Arlene, who was also at that meeting, mentioned to me that she had met Robb and thought he was great and was talking about his movie. And I'm like, what movie? And then she holds up a VHS copy of Scott Gaffney's film, 1999. And she says, close enough. She points to a skier on here, so that's him. So, small human figure on skis, inverted, plunging off a cornice over Donner Lake. Immediately, I made a silent note to never suggest going skiing with this new guy, Robb Gaffney, up at Tahoe. There was no universe in which I could coexist with this guy on the same skill level. He was clearly from the realm of the ski gods, and my North Carolina church ski trip skills were a secret I would forever keep to myself. Despite our friendship forming effortlessly and immediately as we worked together as new doctors, learning how to become psychiatrists, I managed somehow to avoid any conversational thread that would end up with Robb suggesting we go up to Squaw Valley together for some time on the slopes. There was no way I would ever subject myself to that kind of embarrassment. Over time, I had absolutely no doubt that Robb sensed I was avoidant with his secret psychiatry spidey sense. And sometime around a year or two, he finally managed to twist my arm and drag me reluctantly up to Tahoe with him. And what a revelation it was when we finally got on the snow. As with every decision Robb made and personal interaction he had, he revealed himself to be the most talented and yet most humble human being I think I've ever met. Obviously, he knew about my insecurities in skiing, and without my knowing what was going on and without him saying a word, he began teaching me how to ski on Western snow. This process repeated many times over the next 2 decades, both in California and in Idaho, where I came to live after residency. After that first day here at Palisades, I never turned down an opportunity to ski with Robb, and never again gave a moment's thought to any mismatch with the levels we each skied at, because I knew such distinctions simply did not register with him. He was not wired to think in those terms. I began a friendship with a man who would expand my horizons and push my comfort zone to places that I never knew they would or could go. I was also able to learn a new vocabulary through my time with Robb, starting on the ski slope. Yard sale, as in Robb and his brother Scott saying, quote, "Wow, that was some yard sale, Richard," after helping me pick up most of my ski gear distributed like an explosion all over the terrain park at Palisades, when I made the decision at Robb's urging to, quote, "give the kicker a try," unquote. Other activities followed. Robb somehow got me to jump out of an airplane for the first time. 13,000 feet over California's Central Valley, being able to see the Sierra and the Pacific Ocean at the same time, in perfect silence as I drifted back down to the earth. Having conquered this airborne challenge, Robb next directed me to bodies of water. Somehow he must have known that I have a lifelong fear of rivers and whitewater. Because of and in spite of this, I wound up in a kayak with him and our friend Sean Kyle, fellow resident, on the American River doing loops, portaging around a Class 3 rapid to go over it again and again and again. He thought it was so much fun to purposefully flip the kayak in the middle of the rapid. Wanting to save face at any cost, I did my best to hide my obvious fears and my existential terror in doing this, but by the time we did it, I was actually having fun too, and enjoying an activity again that I had lost my taste for when I was in the 5th grade. Professionally, Robb was not only a friend, but a valued colleague. The way Robb approached his job as a psychiatrist and physician connected perfectly with everything about the way he moved through the world. In mental health and psychiatry, much of what we do is to take a journey with our patients into a better understanding of themselves and sometimes gently push their comfort zones along the way. It's a skill that many people work all their lives to attain, and often don't, because doing this with finesse and grace can only partially be taught. The rest is all talent, intuition, and uncommon empathy. Over the years, Robb successfully challenged these gifts well beyond just medication management, which is what most of us do. He channeled his skills to expand into doing psychotherapy. He was eager to get in the trenches with his patients, something very uncommon among shrinks today. What professional legacy does Robb leave for psychiatry and the practice of medicine? Well, this legacy started to form over 20 years ago when we graduated from our residency program. At the beginning of our 4th year of residency, Robb was honored to be elected chief resident. This is a very important position in the academic strata of higher medical education. The chief resident is responsible for setting the tone of the training program, setting the example for other residents to follow in the way that they comport themselves as doctors, allowing perfect adherence to medical ethics and living our oath as physicians to do no harm. In the 1 or 2 years following Robb's tenure as chief resident, UC Davis School of Medicine graduated more medical students choosing to go into psychiatry than any other medical school in the United States. Every one of the graduating medical student seniors from UC Davis would have spent 2 months in the psychiatry rotation while Robb set the tone of what it meant to be an outstanding physician and resident. To me, this is a legacy that lasts decades and lifetimes beyond the 4 years he spent there learning how to become a psychiatrist and sharing his light with others. When I would ask Robb why he seemed to know what he was doing in medicine without ever being taught, why it came so naturally to him, he said more to once than me that he was brought into this world and raised by the greatest physician, teacher, and mentor he could have, his father. Both of Robb's parents' influence on who he was as a human being also was on constant full display for me, because in addition to becoming doctors together, Robb and I became fathers together. In November of 2000, Robb and Andrea became parents with the birth of Noah, and again 2 years later with the birth of Kate. The journey of fatherhood was one that I felt privileged to make with Robb, as my first child was born a few months after Noah. With his calm demeanor, inherent patience, and joy with just about everything that he did, he, along with Andrea, served as perfect examples of what a young father and parent should aspire to being for their children. This didn't stop him, of course, from playing with this notion of what the ideal father should be, as seen in the gag in one of Scott's movies with him jumping on the trampoline and doing flips with a fake baby being worn on his chest and a baby Bjorn. So much was Robb's joy with life that he constantly was finding ways to share it with other people. For years, he had been talking to me about this crazy arts festival deep in the Black Rock Desert of Nevada that I had to go with him to. He attempted to explain to me many times what it was, though, as is the case with Burning Man, it defies description until you've actually been there. Robb went something like 12 times to Burning Man before he even finally got me to go with him in 2014. It was during one of the darkest transitional periods of my life that year. Robb was a steadfast friend in a way that no one else was for me. He created normalcy where there was none, and the importance of that will never, ever be lost. He gave me a week-long introduction to life on the playa. One of his favorite things to do was to take people to Burning Man for the first time and be with them at the very first time they would go on the Esplanade at nighttime. He loved the sense of astonished wonder neophytes would have at the temporary Mecca in the desert of the most open-minded people in the world. He even took both of his parents there. It was amazing to me how we would ride bikes all over the playa, and he would run into people whom he knew everywhere, who were from everywhere. It was clear that Burning Man was a second home for him, and he fed on the energy and the authenticity of the people whom he spent time with at the festival. During the years Robb was sick, I came through Tahoe both on my way to Burning Man and on my way home from Burning Man just to check with him and Andrea and avail them of new stories and adventures from the playa. It brought me such joy to see him light up in defiance of the chronic pain he was experiencing. Robb gave back far more to this world than he ever took from it. Sorry. He did this in ways that only someone who was broadly intelligent and extraordinarily gifted can do. Some of the final gifts that Robb gave to me during our friendship was his encouragement of me in conversations with him to ask the hard questions about the end of life. Was he afraid? Not only was he peaceful about the end of this chapter, but was even playfully able to dabble into the metaphysics and mysticism of what happens to us after we die. He was unafraid, just as he was about any new adventure or challenge in his life. I think for him, approaching the ultimate crossing over was just the slog of skinning up a high peak after a big dump of fresh powder, knowing that the ride down the other side is going to be spectacular. For 24 years, Robb Gaffney was my best friend. I could write a book about the ways Robb expanded the breadth of my breadth as a human being and the richness of my life. And I'm sure in whatever way Robb touched all of our lives, you feel this too. Robb made not an insignificant dent in this world in his 53 years. In a time when it's difficult to keep idealism alive, he was a living example of virtue. Of what it means to be a true human being. People grieve in their own ways. My grief experience of losing my best friend is not one I could extrapolate to everyone. All I can say is that since Robb died, I've felt the same strange but warm comfort as when my father died 29 years ago after a long and merciless illness. I feel his presence as if he's still there in ways that I don't understand. That we all feel this shock at this time of our loss of one of the best people I'll ever be so privileged to call my friend. I know that Robb goes on in ways that will continue to reveal themselves to us for decades to come, leading us as a silent partner in new ways to explore and celebrate our lives, and never, ever letting us back away from bursting therapeutically out of our comfort zones.
I'm kind of feeling like I nailed that best friend line early on. It's kind of working. Yeah, you could figure. Our next speaker's Scott Gaffney, the middle Gaffney brother. Needs no introduction.
Woo! Give me just a moment here. Indulge me for a second. Thank you. This is insane. As I was driving here this morning, it occurred to me that it was 30 years ago this fall that Rob and I drove into this valley to call this place home. And we were just coming to go skiing, and there was absolutely no way we could anticipate this kind of thing right here. So I want to thank you all for being here. Your love and support through this whole process has been incredible. You've helped him get 4 more years out of this whole thing, and we made use of that, and Rob certainly did as well. So thank you so much. I wish this was like a paragraph long and you could go get beers, but it's not. Shortly after Rob was diagnosed with cancer 4 summers ago, my wife said something that stuck with me. She said Rob lived like he knew this was coming. Her comment was so astute. He lived a life so full of purpose, so full of adventure, so full of passion, beauty, and compassion. He pretty much kicked ass in every aspect of life, except for longevity. Rob played hard. He skied incredibly rowdy things with the fluidity we all dream of. He explored the world, but he also relished exploring every inch of our backyard. He shared his knowledge and expertise with others for years in both skiing and kayaking. He played, he studied, he learned, and he simply made everything around him better. He lived for himself in big ways, but he lived for others in even bigger ways. As a psychiatrist, once he was diagnosed, I can't tell you how many people have told me, "Your brother saved my life." Can you imagine having that effect on people? And he spent the final 2 years of his life working feverishly through pain to finish a book about dealing with cancer, hoping his unique perspective as a psychiatrist and patient could help others through the painful process. He suspected he wouldn't live to see the book's returns, but he simply wanted to do something that would make a difference. Rob made rich connections with people. They weren't the connections that might leave people with a feeling like, oh yeah, Rob's kind of cool. His interest in others was so genuine that he connected with people on a deeper level, and I'm sure many of you feel that right now. Rob saw hurdles as an opportunity to leap. He had 2 toddlers while acting as chief resident at Davis, and it's kind of a busy time in one's life, but he somehow found time to write and publish a little first-of-its-kind book called Squallywood. He had no idea what he was doing when he set about to create Squallywood, from writing to layout to distribution, but he did it. His wife, Andrea, says he felt a world away in this other life in Sacramento, and creating Squallywood was a means for him to remain connected with a mountain that he loved so much. Rob stood for something. He stood for this valley. He knew our greatest riches here don't come from more concrete and glass and the flow of money. They come from the experiences we have up on that mountainside. He was deeply disturbed by a marked shift away from the mountain culture and community, so he sacrificed his own personal relationship with this place and committed himself to preserving the same treasure that he'd experienced for future generations. Thanks to Rob and so many out there like him, so far it's worked. Rob was a warrior. In all honesty, he laughed at that label because cancer patients hear that all the time. You're a warrior. He couldn't think of himself as one, but that's exactly what he was. Always has been. In 2016, he suffered just about the worst knee injury I've ever heard of, the kind that sometimes results in amputation. But he couldn't be contained indoors, so he got a hand crank bike, and using his arms, he'd pedal that thing all the way up to the summit of Barker Pass, 1,500 vert, 7 miles. On a solo trip to visit his knee surgeon in Colorado, he stopped at Arches National Park and crutched the several-mile hike in and out of Delicate Arch. And the latest warrior mode, for the past many months, as tumors ravaged his body, he was suffering broken femur-level pain multiple times a day for extended periods. It killed us just to watch. Through gritted teeth, he'd say he's at an 8 or 9 on the pain scale. It was a 10, clearly a 10. But he would never allow himself to say 10. He had to leave room for the possibility of someone somewhere suffering worse than he was. That's a warrior. Then there's parenting. You only get one chance through your kids' childhoods, and Robb crushed that as much as anyone possibly could. He showed Noah and Kate everything. The mountains, the deserts, the rivers, how to send it, how to treat people, how to live. With Andrea, he raised two smart, respectful kids and made sure to instill a thirst for adventure within them because he knew firsthand how that leads to true fulfillment. He was the raddest dad of rad dads. Robb lived like he knew this was coming. The desire to share what he loved carried through in everything he did. Like Richard said, Burning Man. I kept telling him, unfortunately, I couldn't afford to go, and he wouldn't accept that, so one year he bought me a ticket. Another year he convinced our parents to go, over 80 at the time. And of course, he was bringing his preteen kids, so there were 3 generations of Gaffneys wandering the playa, getting this outer world experience because Robb felt no one, especially those he cared about most, should go through life without that kind of experience. He so wanted others to feel what he got to feel. It could be as simple as sharing a vibe from a particular song, or skating missions to remote alpine lakes, or leading friends and family on multiple raft trips down the Grand Canyon. It's even present in Nar, as juvenile and ridiculous as Nar is. And as much as Robb was so far from the look at me kind of person and attitude that Nar seems to showcase, he embraced the deeper psychological aspect of doing things out of your comfort zone, because he felt confronting and overcoming that discomfort leads to richer experiences. So on the surface, Nar is just this debaucherous ski movie, but on a deeper level, it was really a selfless means of encouraging others to get more out of their lives. Amidst this parade of praise, I've got to admit, Robb was not perfect. In his incessant drive to share his experiences with others, he'd often overestimate the abilities, athleticism, wherewithal, or motivation of those with him, and he'd ultimately get them in over their heads. He was the king of just around the corner. He chooses to forgo the trail and opt for a bushwhack because it'll be more interesting. And minutes later, there's our mom in her 80s climbing over a jumble of huge fallen trees. The outcome was so commonplace that we came up with a name for it, getting robbed. Getting into something more arduous, deeper, bigger, and gnarlier than you'd really signed up for. I bet a lot of you out there who spent time with him can remember getting robbed at one point or another. But he always meant well. Who remembers the day he spent skiing around with a doll in a harness and he dropped into Engerbrettsons on the fingers? This realistic little doll leading the way in her baby blue onesie in a power snowplow. Robb would make turns behind little Anna as she pointed it down the spine until they could go no further. Then he picked her up under his arm, did the extreme traverse over to the box chute, and then set her back down and let her lead the rest of the way. He did this all over the mountain, Shirley Chutes, mainline pocket. He was such an advocate of making people feel something. And this day they did. Apparently a lot of them were pissed. But as far as Robb was concerned, it was not only funny, but he was giving the crowd a harmless, lifelong memory from what might otherwise be an ordinary day. And that had value. He was so selfless. Even when he took on this cancer battle, going into his first transplant, he said, I want the full experience. He didn't want to get off easy. He wanted to know the suffering so many people deal with. He didn't breathe a hint of fresh air in the hospital in Houston for 30-something days through his first transplant and went through some really weird stuff. But overall, it went too smoothly, and I truly believe he felt a tinge of disappointment. Then he relapsed and went through a second transplant, and that one knocked him down. He had to fight. His body morphed into forms foreign to him. He was so far from being the mountain climbing machine that we knew. But he pushed through, and soon he was skiing big lines all over the Sierra with his son Noah, and enduring epic backpacking adventures in the desert with his daughter Kate. He was living hard, living with love, living like he knew this was coming. He'd get up at 4 a.m. to hike to skate a remote alpine lake solo, and he'd take such an appreciation in the beauty of the sheer black ice, the frigid air, and the rock glowing gold in the morning sun around him. He'd glide across the ice in solitude, occasionally recording short video clips of himself to send to his oncologists, thanking them for giving him another lease on life. He hoped the clips could provide a breath of life for doctors specializing in a field in which success stories are all too rare. But here we are. It got him too. There's no denying how much this sucks. I'm not only going to miss my little brother, but I'll miss my best friend. The kid I'd snowblow the 4 inches of snow from our entire flat lawn in northern New York with to make a mound with a small jump good enough for throwing 360s. The kid I found one day had chiseled cliffs into our driveway snowbank with his hands and made them pop with a can of black spray paint. We finger skied that little mountain for what seemed like hours. I'll miss that kid who strolled up with me to the patrol shack at Crested Butte on our first trip out west. Back then, you had to check in prior to the hike, and there was no way patrol was going to let these little teenage kids from New York hike up there. I think one of us might have even been in jeans. But we convinced them, and we laid down perfect tracks facing the patrol shack. It was the best run of our lives. How many best runs of our lives we've had since then? Skiing was such a lifelong bond for us. Even this past season in May, when he was months into hurting and managed to summit Half Dome shortly after radiation of a tumor, he sent me shots of a 50-degree patch of snow still hanging on the granite slab beside the cables. He wanted it. Jim Zellers, you know what I'm talking about. If he could have magically summoned his gear, he would have made those turns. But just as much as I'll miss our ski ventures, I'm going to miss the little things. He was hilarious. He was a dork. He was a hilarious dork. He was a doctor of psychiatry who had a Spotify playlist of fart noises. He'd crank them sporadically over his outdoor speakers to baffle Airbnb neighbors. I'm going to miss returning to my car at the grocery store to find the wipers, blinkers, and fan all going full blast. That simply meant Robb was here. And there's the photos he texted the beautiful Tahoe sunset we're both witnessing live, only his image is super saturated beyond reason and is accompanied by the simple caption, "Wow," or "Unreal." We're going to miss everything about our Robb man. He was one fantastic human. But honestly, I consider us lucky. We had bonus time with him. Far too many people don't get that. And since being diagnosed 4 years ago, in between all of the pain and hospital visits and thousands of needles and biopsies and transfusions, he showered us with his presence. He was the same dork, athlete, adventurer, humanitarian, teacher, brother, father, husband, son, friend, and inspiration. We were blessed with his awesomeness for 4 more years, and we had the chance to say goodbye. As a friend recently wrote me, he was one of one, my lifelong adventure buddy, and I feel like the luckiest brother in the world.
All right, next up, we have Noah Gaffney, Robb's son.
My dad had one goal when he was raising Kate and I. He wanted the two of us to be good people, living long, fulfilling, successful lives. Dad had the biggest impact on my life out of any person in the world. He guided me through my life and shaped what my priorities and passions were. It all started when I was about 1 year old, when he put me on a harness strapped to his chest and we would ski down the slopes of Olympic Valley. From this moment on, my brain chemistry was changed and I developed a passion for the sport. My dad and I went on countless adventures through the sport of skiing. He showed me every nook and cranny in the resort, and after that, we explored the backcountry together. At a very young age, we summited many peaks and skied numerous lines that we considered to be goals. We skied Mount Shasta when I was 13. We skied the Mountaineers route on Mount Whitney when I was 15. And numerous other lines on big peaks in the Eastern Sierra we had our eyes on. I am forever grateful for these experiences he showed me, as it was an extremely rare opportunity for someone my age to have had. While it may have been slightly extreme, he prioritized safety above all else. He taught me how to navigate and assess terrain in the backcountry so that I could deal with avalanches safely and never put myself in a dangerous situation. He cared about my sister and I deeply, and the last thing he wanted to do was see us get hurt. For a while, my dad tried to start an organization called Sportgevity, which promoted making wise decisions in sports so you can do them for longer in your life. He had to give up his efforts for Sportgevity to join Sierra Watch due to there being a more pressing matter locally. But years later, my dad told me his main motivation behind creating Sportgevity. He told me, "You know the reason I created Sportgevity was for you and Kate, right?" On top of guiding Kate and I to make safe decisions, Dad also wanted to make sure we lived our lives to the fullest. We could have had childhoods where we didn't leave the town we grew up in, but he made sure we had experiences that we would remember for our whole lives. It started out with small adventures, which most parents wouldn't think to do with their kids. He used to bring Kate and I down the Truckee River in a little raft from Kmart. Every time we passed River Ranch, people on the patio would look shocked as my dad took 4-year-old me down real whitewater rapids. Adventures like these only continued as we grew older. He made sure we experienced some pretty awesome trips like rafting the Grand Canyon, camping in the High Sierras, hikes that took hours so we could ice skate on scenic, smooth ice, and he even took us to Burning Man multiple times. Dad wanted us to have experiences that would add to our lives. But for all the epic excursions we had as a family, it was the little things that he did that made them special. Like playing a certain song every time we drove through a specific area. Pointing out the small details on a hike that held beauty. Sending texts to remind me that he loves me. And stopping everything for a moment so he could give me a big, warm hug. My dad was the kindest, most caring father, and I could never ask for a better one in the world. I love you, Dad, so much, and I'm going to miss you like everything. Thank you for being the best dad ever.
All right, our last speaker before we start the film is Kate Gaffney, Robb's daughter.
Take this off. My grandma recently told me that she saw someone on Facebook comment that if they were to be reborn, they'd want Robb Gaffney to be their dad. Noah and I are lucky to call that our reality. I've spent endless time trying to put together words that describe my childhood. The first words that come to mind were beautiful, unique, loving, and open. But the life I spent with my dad holds significance that words don't seem to capture. My dad was a beauty deliverer. He had an eye for amazing things and the desire to share what he found. When I look back on my childhood, I see and feel a life full of unparalleled beauty. My dad's way of living always seemed to be the ultimate guide to life in the universe. I always felt like he held the key that everyone searches for. A life full of what it truly means to live. My dad was a best friend to many people, including myself. Sometimes some might say that I had an untraditional relationship with both of my parents. I attribute this to several factors, with a significant influence being the fact that my dad was a psychiatrist. I was raised in a home where I could come forward with my experiences openly, without consequence. I always joke that I tell my parents about 95% of my life, and the leftover 5% is what I forget to mention. Whether it was about friendships, school, the outdoors, or even things like partying and relationships, I loved sharing it all. I can imagine that it's hard to believe that a 20-year-old like me would feel comfortable sharing everything about their life. But I always figured that since we all experience life, why not talk about it? Our life is the coolest thing we'll ever get to experience. And if you had the opportunity to ask Robb Gaffney for any advice, I guarantee you'd take it. I took every opportunity available, and as a result, I received invaluable guidance and true friendship from both of my parents. I've recognized my dad's profound appreciation for the natural world as far back as my memory goes. He loved sharing this appreciation with Noah, my mom, and me. I always thought it was funny that he threw a pair of skis on me at the age of 2, predating my earliest memories. He was so excited to show us what he loved. The later years of my childhood were filled with backcountry skiing, backpacking, car camping, alpine lake skating, climbing, river adventures, and endless more. Talk about showing your kids the beauty this world truly holds. When I think of my dad's appreciation for this life, who he was in his entirety comes to mind. However, to keep this speech a reasonable length, I'll choose a few of my favorite memories. In 2018, my dad led a private 3-week rafting trip through the Grand Canyon. One of my favorite camping spots was parked along a beach in one of the most narrow sections. At the campfire that night, I noticed my dad had slipped away on a walk. After a little while, I followed at a distance in his direction. As soon as I saw him, I stopped and simply watched. He was playing Paperman by Ray LaMontagne on his speaker, gazing at the dark orange canyon walls and the stars above. I thought, wow, Dad's really having a moment. And then I recognized that he was just soaking up the grand's beauty and grace every moment he was there. He appreciated every detail the natural world offered. When we camped in the Eastern Sierra, he'd have us switch off our headlamps so we wouldn't miss the stars. He loved how snow decorated tree branches and made icicles on needles. He was fascinated by the patterns of surface horror on the chilly snow and found joy in rocks placed in the creeks and the water patterns they made. My point is that he noticed and loved every single detail. As a child, growing up surrounded by that appreciation was truly a beautiful experience. When my dad was diagnosed with cancer in 2019, calling it heartbreaking news would be an understatement. Most of the time it felt like a curse, and most of the time it still does. Interestingly though, cancer seemed to give as much as it took. Life's fragileness was fully put into perspective, and now oftentimes I feel that special things are made precious because of their impermanence. And for the following 4.5 years, every good moment was taken advantage of. Given the presumed shortened life and uncertain amount of time, it felt like he set out to live all the life he might miss. It ended up becoming the ride of a lifetime, consisting of the highest highs and the lowest lows. My dad and I set out on as many adventures as his battle with cancer would allow. The stars aligned and delivered unforgettable all-time adventures. Sometimes we made plans, and other times we didn't plan at all. What all of our trips had in common was that they were all spent constantly laughing. My dad and I seriously just had so much fun. When I went to college, we didn't want the trips to fall few and far between, so we still made it happen. I'd happily leave Berkeley any weekend or break to do cool things with my dad. One of my favorite college weekends many of my college favorite weekends were actually spent with my dad camping, ice skating, and climbing in the Eastern Sierra. Instead of hitting the bars, both of my college spring breaks were spent road tripping with my dad to the Eastern Sierra and Death Valley. It easily became one of my favorite weeks of the year to plan, look forward to, and eventually make it to. Many parts of the trips were also filled with tears, appreciating that the moments we shared were possible. This next part is where the cancer curse creeps in. I'm going to miss my dad until I'm no longer on this planet. We had so many goals and plans I'd give anything to complete. Sorry. One more laugh, one more smile, one more hug, one more adventure, one more conversation. I would give anything. Sorry. But I know that the most I can do now is to cherish what we did experience, and believe me, I do. My dad passed away surrounded by his entire family. Around 3 hours after he left, I took the blanket he had been using and I went outside alone. I laid down and began talking to him, telling him how much I love him and how much I would miss him. At that moment, I felt quite alone, so I said, "Dad, if you're there, show me a star." No more than 1 second later, a massive shooting star streaked across the sky. In all my years of stargazing, I've never received a star on command. This one felt exceptionally meaningful. As we all have experienced here, the gift of knowing my dad is the gift of a lifetime. My dad opened my eyes to the beauty of this world, and that right there is a gift that just keeps giving. Lastly, I want to share a song that holds so much importance to my dad, and now me. I told my dad that, my dad told me that he listened to it in Houston when he received his first stem cell transplant. This song carried him to the remission periods where we shared some of the richest moments that life can offer. The song has always been beautiful to me, and it especially is now. If you don't know the band Fish, Waste is the perfect introductory song. I can't speak to the exact reasons my dad loved the song, but what I can say is that he wasted his time experiencing and sharing beautiful things. Finally, to conclude my speech, I couldn't go without reading his memorial theme. In my dad's exact words, life's most important aspect is our connection with each other and the natural world around us. Only with openness and the ability to see value of the experience of the other can we open channels that enable us to feel the warmth of the universe around us. So for this song, it would be wonderful if everyone could stand up to embrace each other and to acknowledge the true weight of our loss. Thank you.
Don't wanna be a climber, reaching for the top. Don't wanna be anything where I don't know when to stop. A dream, it's true, but I'd see it through. If I could be wasting my time with you. So if I'm inside your head, don't believe what you might